Rangers owner Ray Davis had a press conference about why he ended up firing his general or his president of baseball operations and his manager in the same week and provided frustratingly little answers. And the ones it did provide were not exactly the answers the Rangers fans want to hear. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, founder host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Thursday, August 18th. Shout out to my parents. Happy anniversary. Happy August 18th to all those who celebrate. Your Rangers are 53 and 65. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. We're going to talk about the Ray Davis press conference and how frustrating and how badly it was handled, quite honestly, from the statement to what he was actually saying when he was taking questions. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, there were some pretty big contradictions in the first a couple of key questions, as well as some frustrating answers that Ray Davis gave in the statement, which seemed to be pretty poorly written. Going back and reading it again, it talked about saying initially that Jon Daniels would not be picking up the final year of his contract or his contract next year, or they wouldn't be extending it, I should say. Sorry, it was all jumbled in my head because it was very jumbled as they wrote it. And then he said that he would be fired effective immediately, which is two different things. Two very different things. There's one thing to say, all right, yeah, you're going to be done at the end of the season, or you're done now, get your crap and get out of here because I don't want to see you again. And it seems like that's what ended up being what happened is get your crap and get out. Maybe it started as that conversation. Credit to Levi Weaver, who asked the question very professionally, which I would have been maybe a little less professional than Levi, but he handles his stuff very well. But he said, did something happen in the middle of that conversation where it changed from we're not going to extend your contract next year to you're done now, let's get you out of here? And then he said no, which means either he's lying or the statement was so poorly written that it implied something that did not happen, or pretty much straight up said they just said they wouldn't be extending the contract picking up next season, and then he said you're fired effective immediately. Those are two different things. And knowing Jon Daniels as I do, which not very well, but knowing people who know him who has spoken with him, he is very much a take the high road kind of guy. This is not going to be something that gets messy. He comes out and airing dirty laundry, whatever. And he doesn't seem like the type of guy to be completely caught off guard by this. But Ray said that this surprised him, and he kind of said it with a face like, yeah, that's what fans wanted to hear. They wanted to hear that he didn't expect this at all. Literally 2 days after having to go out there and defend why he fired his manager, who had never really been given a proper team that should be competitive, had never really been given a fair shake of it, kind of made them overperform in 2019, his very first year on the job, but then didn't have very much of a choice in the talent level and how they performed the last couple of years. Even this year, they were kind of underperforming their record, which underperforming their actual performance. The record was worse than their performance on the field actually was, and he knows that he did not really get a fair shake of it. But to have him go out there knowing, as he said, knowing that he was going to do this today and did not give really any answer as to why he didn't do it both on the same day at the same time, it just feels petty and personal and vindictive. And that's just so unnecessary. The guy who has done so much for your franchise, who has been there since before you had anything to do with this franchise. They took over in 2010 as the primary owner. Has been more of a primary role as of late, more vocal, which is, saying something, which is actually, not saying something because he barely ever speaks to the media. And we can see why he really got tripped up on his words. Credit to all the media members in attendance who were asking some very good, very pointed questions and that deserved answers that were not really given by Ray Davis, and none of the other owners were up there to speak. This is a lot of Ray, and I feel like a lot of this decision was Ray, since he is the majority owner. He is the mouthpiece for whatever the one or two times a year that he, if two times a year, where he comes out and decides to say anything to the media. But he also said that Chris Young was caught off guard by this, which is also frustrating, because Chris Young was brought in from Major League Baseball's front office. He was not working with the team. He has not worked with the team outside of being employed by them to throw baseballs at all until he came in December of 2020. So he has seen one full season and half of another season during which the Rangers lost 100 games for the first time since the 1970s, and this year where they're slightly better, more entertaining, but still not a great record because of quite a few pretty unlucky bad breaks for this team. But they think, okay, now you're ready to go take over. He said, yeah, we have seen that Jon Daniels has been able to build a winning club. We thought that this was a time for Chris Young, because they wanted to give him, quote, an on ramp to some of the activities, the duties, and whatever a general manager is going to do through the end of the season, which there's not much. There's not a whole lot left. The trade deadline is done. There's not a whole lot going on the waiver wire. And if you're preparing him to go do things in the offseason, like, he's not having these conversations with free agents right now. There was nothing that keeping John Daniels on through the end of the season, like that would have impeded. There's nothing that having him there, just being around, even if you knew that he was going to be gone at the end of the year, even if Jon Daniels knew that he was going to be gone at the end of the year, there's nothing that having him around for the last couple of months wouldn't improve. Just like, hey, having someone to bounce some ideas off of. Hey, I haven't seen the scenario. What if this happens? What if this, that, and the other happens? Like, having him there in the office as a sounding board would definitely be a very, very helpful thing, because Jon Daniels has been a GM or in the lead guy in the front office since 2005, the end of 2005. Like, he has seen so much, he has built so much, he has done so many things for this franchise, and this unceremonious exit is way, way worse than what he was owed for all that he has given to this franchise. Coming up, we're going to look a little bit at some of the money aspects that were a little eye-opening of what was said by ownership at the press conference. But first, this episode is brought to you by Get Liver Help. That's right. The liver is the body's metabolic furnace. It is responsible for flushing out harmful toxins and igniting fat-burning metabolism. But thanks to modern diets rich in unhealthy processed foods and constant exposure to thousands of man-made environmental toxins, most of us have overworked livers. But now it's easy to rejuvenate your liver health and reignite your metabolism thanks to Liver Health Formula by Pure Health Research. Liver Health Formula contains 8 liver boosting super nutrients like turmeric, beet, and artichoke extract. All that work together to wake up a sluggish liver, turn it into a toxin flushing, fat burning machine. No more tired and low energy all the time. And best of all, Liver Health Formula makes it easier to maintain a healthy body weight long term. As a listener of the show, you can try Liver Health Formula risk free today and get a free bottle of Curb Fit with your order. Curb Fit is a safe, all natural appetite suppressant that makes it easy to say no to naughty foods. This makes the perfect complement to Liver Health Formula. Go to getliverhelp.com/MLB to learn more. That's that's getliverhelp.com/MLB to try Liver Health Formula completely risk-free and claim your free bottle of Curb Fit with your order. Go to getliverhelp.com/MLB right now to get started. Now, I think one of the most frustrating things about this whole situation is how he didn't get to go out on his own terms. This was a very unceremonious exit in a season that has been underwhelming, but still there should not have been that high of expectations during coming into the season if anyone with the power was being logical about it. But it's not the way you should treat the guy who built the best teams in franchise history, took this team from a perennial laughing stock to an actually good franchise, made some incredible trades, made some mistakes for sure, but brought you some fantastic moments. And this is what I'm talking about with Jon Daniels and his statement after being fired in this unceremonious way. Quote, somewhere along the way, this baseball fan from Queens got an opportunity to help lead a Major League Baseball franchise in Texas. It's been an unbelievable experience. My family and I are incredibly thankful to so many people along the way. To John Hart and Tom Hicks, who gave an eager kid one opportunity after another, and for believing in me when the reasons to do so weren't always clear. To Ray Davis and the Rangers ownership group for providing us with a steady hand in challenging times and the resources and support needed to build. To all Rangers fans out there, your passion and support, thank you so much for welcoming us into this community. There are some spectacularly talented and driven people in the organization from CY throughout the organization. There are going to be amazing moments in the summers and falls again soon, and you will get the parade you deserve. To every player, coach, scout, trainer, and staff member I've had the privilege of working with, you are the reason I loved every minute of this job. The shared experiences, the good and the bad, are the things I cherish most. Excited to watch what you build from here. To the media, for treating us fairly and with respect and improving the game by bringing our fans in closer. Many of you have become friends. You never made it personal, and I'm grateful for that. Hope you feel we were straight with you. Looking forward to being a dad, husband, and fan, and forever and to see what comes next. Forever grateful. What a freaking class act. What a high road type of guy. That is just exactly who Jon Daniels is. And even in this crap circumstance they put him in, this very boot him out the door on the way out, that feels personal and a little vindictive timing wise, which it is all about timing again. He still has the grace and the kindness and the humbleness to still not burn a single bridge, not even, light a match, not even smoke a cigarette on that bridge for fear of it catching fire. This guy is as good as they come, and there's a good reason to why he is so beloved. I mean, from the work he did in the community, which was a very, very real thing, the Do It for Dirt opportunities ever since that first started. I remember actually the only time that I have met him was at a Do It for Dirt event, the very first one back in 2014. He was always at those, always giving it with his time, with his resources, just pouring into this community, which he cared a whole lot about. And that is something you don't always get from these guys that have as stressful a jobs as they have. And that's something that I really appreciate about Jon Daniels, and something that I'm sure Chris Young will learn from his legacy and step up in a very similar way. But one of the things that stuck out to me at the press conference is Ray Davis's off the cuff remark about, we're not going to spend like we did this offseason, which on the surface you think, yeah, okay. Obviously you're not going to spend $500 million in a 2-day span. That's probably not going to happen again. And you know what? That's fine. I get that. The long-term contracts. But in terms of, let's look at what it did for this payroll. When they spent all this money, all this insane amount of money, just completely ridiculous. It took them from, let's see, in 2021, the Rangers had the 20th highest payroll at 95.8 million. First time it's been under 100 million since 2011 to 145 million, which put them at 15th in Major League Baseball for a market this size, a TV market that has games from New Mexico in 5 different states: Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. Like, this is a huge market, and the Rangers have not really spent like it in recent years. I mean, sure, those big contracts were nice and great, but there was a real floor on that payroll. There's a reason why the Rangers were so bad last year, and even in those interim years where it seemed like they probably should have rebuilt, those payrolls weren't quite what you needed to if you wanted this team to be actually competitive. I mean, let's look at when they took over at some of these payroll numbers. Rangers, this new ownership group took over in 2010. Back then, the Rangers had a $55.2 million budget. They were 27th in Major League Baseball in terms of overall payroll. The next year, they bumped that up significantly. They brought in Adrian Beltre. That made a huge difference. I can't think of any other huge free agents that they paid after that, but I think Josh Hamilton got quite a chunk of change. Same with Ian Kinsler and some of the other key players on that. But the Rangers jumped up to $92.3 million that next year. were 96-55, best team in franchise history. They had the 13th highest payroll, still not even in the top 10. The next couple of years, they were finally in the top 10, sixth in payroll, which is some of the highest they've gotten in many, many years. But to that point, 2012, 120 million had the sixth highest payroll. Then we're eighth from 2013 all the way to 2016, eighth every single year, went from 127 million to the final year where they were eighth, 161.3 million. 2017 was the highest payroll that they have had since Rangers ownership took over, and the Rangers did not make the playoffs that year. And it seemed like that would have been the year to start the rebuild. You have $178 million payroll, third highest in baseball. You finish 78-84. That might be about the time to start tanking. It was going to be Adrian Beltre's last year. The next year, everyone knew it was kind of coming up at some point, but the Rangers did not go into the rebuild at that point, and I think that might have been the biggest mistake of all of this front office's history, especially Jon Daniels's. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was his decision to not go into the rebuild, or maybe it was a push from ownership with these mediocre payrolls that ended up following in years where they were expected to be competitive, from 2018 to 2020. Coming up, we're going to look a little bit at that, some of the big free agent contracts, and how willing this ownership group has been to spend, and what a less expensive but still successful offseason might take financially coming up this winter. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have got you covered. If you want to bet on the Rangers doing well when they go up to Minnesota this weekend, that's your prerogative. I'm going to advise maybe you want to bet on Minnesota, or just, I don't know, a different game. Maybe a different game if you want to bet on the Yankees losing again, as they have continued to go into a downward spiral since trading away Joey Gallo. That'd be really funny. If you want to do that, I think might be a decent bet. So go to BetOnline, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Now let's look at the recent payroll in several recent seasons. The Rangers were 14th in payroll in 2019 and 2020. Both of those seasons, the Rangers were theoretically trying to compete. And you know what? To their credit, in 2019, they kind of did. They ended up finishing 78-84. And if not for a couple of key injuries to Joey Gallo and to Hunter Pence, the Rangers might have ended up in a playoff spot. And that playoff drought at this point would be 3 years, heading into 3 years, as opposed to 6 years. I think 6 years. Yeah, 2016 was the last playoff year. But injuries did happen, and the Rangers did end up falling off that year. They had two great starting pitchers and not a whole lot else going. But in terms of free agent contracts, one of the big reasons why this offseason was such a big deal and such a surprise to me from a front office that was, to their credit, they were tooting their own horn, saying, you got to get your expectations up about us. We're going to spend a crap ton of money. And I'm like, well, there haven't been a whole lot of big contracts in this club's history. I mean, shoot, Shin-Soo Choo is the biggest contract given out by this current ownership group before this offseason. That was 7 years, 130 million. And that happened quite a while ago. And yeah, it didn't necessarily turn out the best for the Rangers, but he ended up being serviceable, plenty serviceable. But because he wasn't fantastic and extremely outperforming his contract, it ended up being poo-pooed by Rangers fans for quite a long time. I think much more so than was deserved, because Shin-Soo Choo, for the most part, was a pretty darn solid player for the Texas Rangers. But outside of that, this year, Seager, 10 years, 325 million, that completely blows that out of the water. Simeon, 7 years, 175 million, nearly $50 million above what their biggest contract was before that. But before that, even during the years where the Rangers were really good, they didn't give out these huge contracts. I mean, sure, they ended up picking up Prince Fielder's deal, and that's part of why their payroll went so high. But honestly, once he was retired or medically retired, insurance ended up paying for a whole lot of that. So there could have been even more added on to those payrolls in 2016 or 17, when it was kind of clear that Prince Fielder wasn't quite the same way. I mean, talk about one of the great what ifs in Rangers history. I mean, man, if that doesn't happen, then that 2017 team, well, maybe they're pushing for the playoffs. Maybe the 2016 team, maybe the 2015 team, maybe both those teams make it out of that first round against the Blue Jays. But I mean, who knows? But I mean, last year they had the 20th highest payroll. This year it's still middle of the pack, and you really only brought in three big guys. You did bring in a fourth one that is not costing a whole lot. That is earning his keep. But some of the other contracts, when you look at the like fourth and fifth highest players on this Rangers team, I start to get a little confused. Garrett Richards is owed $9 million next year. By the way, he is DFA. That was one of the first moves of the Chris Young tenure. Great move that probably should have been done a while. I don't have any idea why that was such a big contract that was offered to a guy who was pretty darn mediocre. Cole Calhoun has a $5.5 million option for next year, or I believe a $1 million buyout. Not sure on the buyout. It might just be the option. I think it's just a team option. So we'll see how. Oh, it was a club option for Garrett Richards next year. All right, well that makes a little bit more sense. But still, Brad Miller is owed $4 million next year, and I cannot imagine that he is going to be on this team next year because he has been also quite horrendous since pretty much the very start of the season. Had a great start to the year, but yeah, has not been super great since. So that's why those huge contracts were such a big deal. Even John Gray lines in the top 10 of contracts, and that was the third biggest contract in those 2 days. He was right below Yu Darvish's 6 years, 60 million. Adrian Beltre's first contract with the Rangers before the 2011 season was 5 years and $80 million. Kind of insane to me that the initial contract for Shin-Soo Choo was longer than Adrian Beltre. They did end up paying Beltre for 2 more years and $36 million more. So I do believe, actually, no, I think that might still, yeah, no, that's still less than Shin-Soo Choo made, which is kind of insane. But, it is what it is. And outside of that, the Rangers haven't really invested. They haven't invested highly in these clubs. They have not invested. And one of the things that credit Evan Grant, he asked the question, so you agreed to a rebuild, and what made you change your mind on going in a different direction? And it was not really an answer by Ray Davis, because it seems like he only agreed to a rebuild when it was absolutely forced upon him at the very end of 2020. And he's very lucky. The Rangers are very lucky that he's very lucky, I could say, that he agreed to it then, because you could kind of lean into it and have a less miserable first year of a full-on rebuild. 2019 was at least fun and scrappy, but you kind of knew the writing's on the wall. The Rangers need to do something because they're not quite good enough to compete, and they're not quite bad enough to be going for a first overall pick. But that's what they were in 2020 in the back half. And man, that series in San Diego changed quite a bit. And in 2021, they actually finally said rebuild out loud for the first time ever. And even then, they were still pretty gun shy about it, even though it's obvious they should have leaned into it in 2018. But I mean, now you decide to turn course because they aren't immediately fantastic out after spending on basically bringing in four impactful players. That's not how a rebuild works. The Raiders haven't been out and out bad during pretty much any part of the tenure of this ownership group. They brought in at exactly the right time. They went to back-to-back World Series in their first year, had an amazing 2012 regular season that kind of slipped away at the very end and lost in the stupid wild card game. But they also made the playoffs in, let's see, outside they didn't make it in 2013 or 2014. They did play game 163 in 2013. If you want to count that as technically postseason baseball, I kind of tend to do. I kind of do tend to count that as postseason baseball. So basically, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the first 7 years this team was in the playoffs of this ownership group, and they don't know what it takes to have a rebuild. And he talked very openly, Ray Davis did, very openly about how, I don't really, baseball, whenever there was a very specific baseball question. I don't really know baseball. I just kind of trust my front office guys. And their front office guys were telling you this year, don't expect them to go worst to first, because that's not a thing that really ever happens. And it seems like he just got impatient and he wanted to make a ceremonial change. He wanted to, I get the Chris Woodward being some kind of, I'm pissed off and I'm going to stomp around because I'm big and I'm rich and I can do what I want because this is my baseball team and I don't owe anything to everybody, which is an owner's thought, not necessarily my thought, because you owe a lot to your fans. of explaining what the heck is going on, because they're the ones who are making you all of that money. It's not just your rich person's toy to plaything to do whatever you want with, and everyone else can go screw. No, those people are the ones that are giving you your money that you can afford the rich plaything that you think it is, and that care a whole heck of a lot more and are, really invested in the everyday, and obviously know more about baseball than your fans probably do. But like, this just seems, it seems stupid, because if you really thought that Jon Daniels' plan was so dumb and so bad, then why are you not axing the guy who leave in charge in his wake is the guy who is his handpicked successor? Like, it just feels, that's why this feels so petty. But the Rangers said they're going to spend a little bit this offseason, just not quite, $500 million, which, okay. But there's not a whole lot out there. We got to start. Let's start looking at what the Rangers contracts are at this point next year. 2023, their payroll at this point is $104 million. That is without any kind of extension on Martin Perez. I believe that is also including all of these contract offers, and that would rank them at 12th right now, which could really vary a whole lot depending on who signs where and who loses who and all that nonsense. But still, that's a decent baseline. So let's say the Rangers want to have, you got to have a little bit more expensive of a payroll than 145. I think top 10, if you want to make the playoffs with how this team has been constructed, if you're not, some of the best at drafting and developing and signing these underrated guys, like say the Brewers are right now. The Brewers are 19th in payroll, which is behind the Rangers, and the Mariners are right now 22nd in payroll, which is, honestly, I don't know how they did that, because I thought they had a lot more big contracts, but that number will creep up there quite a bit in future years. And same with Tampa Bay, who is 24th right now. But for the most part, you need to be a little bit higher up. The Phillies are number 4 right now and are still just barely scraping by for a playoff spot, last I checked. But they are behind St. Louis. They're behind the Giants. They're behind the Cubs, which is very surprising with how they have shed so much payroll as of late. I think part of that is their contracts. But anyway, let's look at some free agents. Let's say you add a 4-year, $60 million contract for Martin Perez. You say that's what it is. What'll get it done. Okay, that's fine. That puts you at $119 million at that point. Now there's some other guys that you need at least one, if not two, probably two, if not three, free agent starting pitchers. And the ones that are at the top of the market, they all have some bumps and warts. They all have player options for the most part that I think a decent number of them will be declining. Carlos Rodon, I think he is going to end up declining that option and becoming a free agent again. Justin Verlander is going to be 40, I think, and he's missed a decent chunk of the season, and he missed 2 years before that. But when he's been there, he has been fantastic. Also would be a nice middle finger to Houston to go sign Justin Verlander and have him come here right after being with them. Also, the top guy on the market, Jake DeGrom. He's got a $30 million player option that I'm pretty sure he's going to decline. He has been the best pitcher in baseball when he's been healthy, but that has been a big when he's been healthy. He's just come back. This year, he has missed a decent time in his career. He's a former Rookie of the Year, a 2-time Cy Young winner, and if he was healthy, would have been pretty much a slam dunk Cy Young winner last year as an All-Star. He pitched in just 15 games, 92 innings, but a 1.08 ERA for him last year. He is just on some historic, otherworldly level right now. He's only pitched in 3 games so far this year, averaging a little over 5 innings per start, has a 1.62 ERA. He is just so darn good. But it might take a Max Scherzer level contract, and I'm not sure that the Mets are going to be able to. The Mets ownership is going to be able to walk away and live with themselves in Queens if they let this guy, who is, when he's healthy, the best pitcher in baseball and one of the better pitchers that we've seen in the past 20 years, if they let him walk away just because they weren't willing to gamble big on him staying healthy and being able to keep him healthy and being worth that massive contract. So if the Rangers want to go blow them out of the water and get a 3-year, $120 million offer, I think that's something that would be difficult for him to turn down. I don't know if the Mets would match that or beat that. It might end up taking something like 3 years, $150 million. Like, honestly, it might be an average of $50 million a year that it would take to get him. Not entirely sure what the market's going to be like that, but it would be something really, really confusing. Another guy who is going to be a big free agent is John Gray, or excuse me, not John Gray, Chris Sale. Sorry, John Gray, just somehow popped back into my mind. They already got him. But Chris Sale is going to be another free agent who is also going to miss the rest of this year, has missed quite a bit of time since coming to Boston. He's been incredibly effective when he's on the mound, but he has missed a pretty darn decent chunk of time. Nathan Eovaldi is a guy who I think the Rangers could go after and get. He is going to be, I think he's 32 and a half right now, or he's going to be during the offseason. Either way, Clayton Kershaw, another guy who's missed a lot of time lately. Sean Manaea is going to be another big option. Maybe they look for a Kyle Gibson reunion a little bit cheaper. But again, there's going to need to be some money thrown around if they want to get one of these big guys like a DeGrom, like a Verlander, Rodon, maybe even Noah Syndergaard might command a pretty decent chunk of change. But still, the Rangers are going to have to throw out a decent chunk of money. And if they don't have a top 10 payroll, I'm having a hard time seeing how Chris Young will make it through next year if the Rangers don't overperform, because we've seen how quickly ownership can lose their temper after finally agreeing to rebuild for the first time and losing their patience after a year. And if Chris Young isn't able to do it next year, then shoot, whoever they hire as manager for next year and Chris Young and pretty much anyone might be the very next one to have one of these kind of press conferences where we end up angry and frustrated and sad. Well, what a fun note to end this show on. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully talking about this week's actual games. Might actually look at what the baseball on the field happened, maybe some potential next future manager of the Rangers if it is not Tony Beasley, and a look at Tony Beasley's candidacy. But that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.